Humans are constantly communicating, yet most of us only hear a fraction of what is being said. Words are the surface. Beneath them lies a torrent of signals, tiny shifts in expression, posture, tone, and rhythm that reveal far more than people consciously intend. Learning to read minds is not magic. It is the art and science of observing these signals, interpreting them accurately, and connecting the dots. At its core, mind reading is a skill built on 3 pillars: deep observation, emotional intelligence, and pattern recognition. Deep observation trains you to notice the subtleties most overlook: a flicker of the eyes, a hand that trembles slightly, a voice that tightens for a fraction of a second. Emotional intelligence allows you to interpret these signals with nuance, recognizing the difference between fleeting emotion and persistent motivation, between projection and genuine sentiment. Pattern recognition ties these threads together, helping you see the repeated behaviors and recurring cues that form the invisible architecture of someone's thoughts and drives. The beauty of this skill is paradoxical. The quieter and more present you become, the louder people's inner world reveals itself. Those fleeting signals, once unnoticed, begin to form coherent stories. The behaviors that seemed random now make sense. You start to understand not only what someone is feeling, but why they are acting the way they do. This is not about manipulation or intrusion. It is about clarity, empathy, and insight. It is about seeing people as they truly are beneath the polished surface, understanding their motivations, fears, and desires, and navigating interactions with awareness rather than guesswork. Mastering this approach transforms conversations into windows, actions into clues, and silence into information. What follows is a roadmap to decode human behavior with precision, depth, and subtlety, unlocking the kind of understanding that most people never experience. Let's take it step by step. Number 1. Before people lie with words, they tell the truth with their face. Micro-expressions are fleeting facial movements that appear for a split second, often less than half a second, before the conscious mind steps in to regain control. They are the emotional body's reflexes. You don't create them, they erupt. That's what makes them powerful. When someone hears unexpected information, their true emotion surfaces before logic has time to intervene. A flash of fear, a spark of contempt, a micro-grimace of disgust. These signals escape the mask long before the person chooses what to say. By the time the smile arrives, the truth has already passed. What makes micro-expressions unique is that they cannot be faked consistently. You can rehearse words, you can practice posture, but you cannot train your nervous system to lie on command without leakage. Emotion is faster than intention. Look closely at the eyes and mouth. A genuine smile activates the muscles around the eyes, creating slight creases. A forced smile only lifts the lips, pleasant but hollow. Contempt often appears as a one-sided mouth raise, subtle and sharp, revealing moral superiority or hidden judgment. Fear widens the eyes momentarily, even when the voice sounds calm. Anger tightens the jaw and flares the nostrils before any harsh word is spoken. The key is not to stare, but to soften your focus. Micro-expressions are easier to catch when you are relaxed, present, and emotionally neutral. When you stop trying to figure people out, their truth becomes easier to see. Another secret: micro-expressions appear most clearly right after a trigger, a question, a name, a memory, a suggestion. Watch the first reaction, not the explanation that follows. The explanation is curated. The first reaction is raw. Mastering micro-expressions doesn't turn you into a mind reader. It turns you into a truth listener. You begin to hear emotions people don't know they're broadcasting. And once you learn to see what flashes beneath the surface, you realize something profound. People are always telling you who they are, just not in words. Number 2, you can't read people accurately until you know who they are when nothing is happening. Every person has a baseline, a natural rhythm of speech, movement, posture, tone, and emotional expression they return to when they feel safe, unpressured, and unobserved. Some people speak fast. Some avoid eye contact. Some fidget constantly. None of that means anything until it changes. Most people fail at reading others because they judge behaviors in isolation. But psychology doesn't work in snapshots, it works in contrast. The moment you truly start reading someone is when their behavior deviates from their norm. Watch for sudden shifts. A person who is usually relaxed becomes overly formal. A talkative person grows quiet. Someone who normally answers casually begins over-explaining. These changes aren't random. They are responses to internal pressure. Something in the environment has triggered discomfort, fear, excitement, guilt, or self-protection. Change is the nervous system adjusting in real time. Tone dropping slightly, voice tightening, pace increasing, posture stiffening, hands disappearing. These are not conscious decisions, they are adaptive reactions. The body reacts before the mind constructs a story to justify it. What makes baseline reading powerful is that it removes judgment. You stop labeling behaviors as good or bad and start seeing them as signals. Eye contact avoidance doesn't mean dishonesty if it's normal for them, but if someone who usually holds your gaze suddenly can't meet your eyes when a certain topic arises, that's information. Another overlooked detail: emotional shifts often happen before verbal shifts. A person may still say the right words, but their energy has already changed. Trust the shift, not the script. To sharpen this skill, observe people during neutral moments, casual conversations, light topics, routine interactions. This is when their baseline is clearest. Then notice what happens when stakes appear: questions, expectations, accountability, attraction, confrontation. Baseline is the map. Change is the message. Once you train your eye for this contrast, people become far more transparent, not because they are careless, but because no one can hide change from themselves. And when you learn to see change clearly, you stop guessing what people mean. You start understanding what they're responding to. Number 3. Single gestures are deceptive. Patterns are honest. One crossed arm means nothing. Averted eyes mean nothing. A shifting foot means nothing, on their own. The human body speaks in clusters, not symbols. To decode it accurately, you must read behavior the way the brain produces it, layered, simultaneous, and connected. When an emotion is genuine, it doesn't appear in just one place. It spreads. It shows up in posture, movement, muscle tension, breathing, and orientation, all at once. That's why trained observers never jump to conclusions from a single cue. They wait for convergence. For example, resistance isn't just crossed arms. It's crossed arms plus leaning away, plus tightened lips, plus minimal verbal responses. Engagement isn't just eye contact. It's eye contact plus forward lean, plus open hands, plus feet angled toward you. When multiple signals align, the message becomes clear. Feet are especially revealing because people forget to control them. While the upper body performs politeness, the feet point toward true interest, or toward the nearest exit. A torso may face you out of respect, but the feet reveal intention. They are honest because they are automatic. Another overlooked cluster is breathing and stillness. When someone feels threatened or is hiding something, breathing becomes shallow and movement reduces. The body goes into conservation mode. In contrast, comfort creates fluid motion, natural gestures, relaxed posture, rhythmic breathing. Pay attention to timing as well. Authentic reactions appear instantly and fade naturally. Artificial ones arrive late and linger too long. A delayed nod, a smile that comes after thinking, a laugh that feels placed rather than spontaneous. These delays suggest cognitive control rather than emotional flow. What makes cluster reading powerful is that it removes guesswork. You're no longer interpreting feelings. You're observing physiology. The body doesn't argue. It doesn't debate. It responds. The goal isn't to judge or accuse. It's to understand the internal state beneath the surface performance. When you read clusters, you stop being misled by charisma, confidence, or polished speech. You begin to see what's really happening beneath the presentation. And once you train your eye to recognize clusters, you realize something subtle but profound. People can control parts of themselves, but they can't coordinate their entire body perfectly. truth leaks through coordination failures. Number 4. Listen to language patterns. People reveal their inner world, not just through what they say, but through how their mind organizes language. Words are never random. They follow emotional pressure, cognitive load, fear, desire, and self-protection. When you learn to listen beneath the meaning of sentences, you begin to hear the architecture of thought itself. One of the first things to notice is word inflation. When someone uses excessive qualifiers, honestly, to be clear, trust me, I swear, they are often compensating for internal doubt. The language works harder when the truth feels fragile. Truth doesn't need reinforcement, anxiety does. Another pattern is distance language. When people feel uncomfortable or disconnected from their actions, they unconsciously create space through words. Mistakes were made replaces I made a mistake. Things happened replaces I did this. The shift from I to we, or from active to passive voice, is a psychological retreat. It signals avoidance of ownership. Listen also for absolutes. Always, never, everyone, no one. Absolutes emerge when emotion overwhelms nuance. They reflect a mind trying to regain control by simplifying reality. Emotional reasoning speaks in extremes. Then there is temporal distortion. People who are fabricating or withholding information often get tangled in time, over-specifying irrelevant details while glossing over key moments. Too much structure in the wrong places is often a sign of mental editing. Pay attention to pace and rhythm. Authentic speech flows unevenly, but naturally. Controlled speech sounds smoother, flatter, or overly precise. When someone slows down unnaturally, corrects themselves repeatedly, or rehearses phrasing mid-sentence, the mind is working harder than usual. Another powerful signal is emotional mismatch. The words say one thing, the tone says another. Someone claims they are fine, but their voice lacks warmth. Someone says they're excited, yet their energy is muted. Emotion carries tone, not vocabulary. The most revealing moments happen during spontaneous language slips, jokes that go too far, metaphors chosen without thought, or phrases that escape before being softened. These are cognitive fingerprints. They show how a person truly frames reality. When you listen this way, conversation becomes data. You stop reacting to statements and start observing mental patterns. And once you hear how people think, not just what they claim, you realize something quietly powerful. Language doesn't just express truth, it leaks it. Number 5. Use psychological projection. One of the most overlooked ways people reveal their inner world is through what they accuse others of. Psychological projection is the mind's quiet defense mechanism. When a thought, desire, fear, or trait feels uncomfortable to acknowledge internally, the psyche relocates it outward. Instead of saying, "This is happening in me," the mind says, "This is happening in you." What looks like criticism is often confession in disguise. People don't project randomly. They project what they are actively wrestling with. Someone hyper-focused on loyalty may be suppressing fears of betrayal. Someone constantly accusing others of manipulation may be battling manipulative impulses they refuse to own. Someone quick to label others as selfish may be struggling with unfulfilled needs they feel guilty admitting. Projection externalizes inner conflict so the ego can stay intact. The key to using projection psychologically is not to take accusations personally. The moment you defend yourself emotionally, you miss the information. Instead, step back and ask, what internal tension would produce this interpretation? The accusation often reveals more about the speaker's unresolved landscape than about the target. Projection also explains disproportionate reactions. When someone responds with intensity far beyond the situation, it's rarely about the moment itself. You've touched a psychological bruise. The reaction is fueled by stored emotion, not present facts. The past has entered the room. Another subtle form of projection appears as moral policing. People who rigidly enforce rules or values on others are often struggling to maintain control over those same impulses internally. Condemnation becomes containment. Judgment becomes self-regulation. Listen carefully to repeated themes. Projection is not a one-time event. It's a pattern. When the same criticism surfaces across different contexts, It points to a persistent internal issue. The mind rehearses what it needs to resolve. Importantly, projection doesn't mean the accusation is always false. Sometimes people recognize traits they genuinely possess. The difference lies in emotional charge. Calm observation is awareness. Heated accusation is projection. When you learn to recognize projection, you gain emotional freedom. You stop absorbing misplaced blame. You stop arguing with ghosts. You start seeing people's internal struggles written between their words. And here is the quiet power of this skill. Once you understand projection, conflict becomes information, not identity. You no longer ask, why are they attacking me? You ask, what are they trying to escape within themselves? And in that moment, you're no longer reacting. You're seeing. Number 6. Ask calibrated questions. The most revealing questions are never aggressive. They are precise, open, and disarming. Calibrated questions are designed not to extract information, but to create psychological space. Space where people lower their guard and reveal themselves naturally. When a question feels safe, the mind stops defending and starts explaining. An explanation is where truth slips out. Direct questions trigger protection. Why did you do that? Feels like an accusation. The mind braces, edits, and performs. Calibrated questions remove that pressure. They shift the burden of thinking back to the speaker without triggering threat. Questions that begin with what or how are especially powerful. What was going through your mind at that moment? How did you feel after everything settled? These questions invite reflection, not defense. They force the person to re-enter the experience, and when they do, their language, tone, and body inevitably change. Another key is neutral delivery. The power of a calibrated question lies as much in how it's asked as in the words themselves. A calm tone signals safety. Curiosity disarms suspicion. Judgment shuts doors. Curiosity opens them. Then comes the most underestimated tool, silence. After asking a calibrated question, stop talking. Do not rescue the silence. The human brain is uncomfortable with unfinished space. People will fill it, often with information they didn't intend to share. The second sentence is usually more revealing than the first. Watch what happens next. Does the person pause longer than usual? Do they reframe the question? Do they over-explain, minimize, or deflect? These responses reveal cognitive load and emotional tension. The answer is data, but the process of answering is richer data. Another advanced technique is retrospective framing. What would you do differently now? If you could replay that moment, what stands out? These questions bypass justification and tap into self-awareness. They reveal values, regrets, and priorities without confrontation. Calibrated questions don't corner people. They invite self-disclosure. And the more people talk about themselves, the more transparent they become. The paradox is this: the less you push for truth, the more willingly it appears. When you master calibrated questions, conversations stop being exchanges of information and start becoming windows into the mind. You're no longer interrogating. You're listening while people explain themselves to themselves. Number 7. Emotions are loud, but motivation is permanent. Most people misread others because they focus on how someone feels in a moment, rather than what is quietly driving them over time. Emotions fluctuate. Motivation persists. If you want to understand people deeply, you must look past emotional expression and identify the forces that consistently move them. Anger, sadness, excitement, or fear are surface waves. Motivation is the current beneath them. A person may appear kind, calm, or even joyful, while being driven by insecurity, ambition, or the need for control. Another may seem cold or distant, while being motivated by self-protection or fear of abandonment. Emotional display tells you how they're reacting. Motivation tells you why they keep choosing the same patterns. To identify motivation, ask 2 quiet questions. What do they want to gain? What are they afraid to lose? These 2 forces shape almost every decision. People will endure discomfort, lie, overextend, or withdraw to protect what they value or to avoid what they fear. Once you see this, behavior stops being confusing. Notice repetition. Motivation reveals itself through patterns, not moments. Who do they pursue? What do they avoid? Where do they consistently compromise or refuse to? Patterns are motivation made visible. Another key insight. Emotions often mask motivation. Someone may express anger when the true driver is shame. Someone may display confidence while being motivated by validation. Someone may claim independence while being motivated by fear of reliance. Emotion is the costume. Motivation is the actor. Watch how people behave under pressure. Stress strips away emotional performance and reveals core drives. When resources are limited, time, attention, power, what do they prioritize? That priority exposes motivation more clearly than any self-description ever could. Language also offers clues. Pay attention to what people defend passionately and what they rationalize repeatedly. Defense protects motivation. Rationalization hides it. Understanding motivation over emotion gives you strategic clarity. You stop reacting to mood shifts and start anticipating behavior. You know which buttons not to press and which ones people press themselves. And here is the deeper truth. People don't move toward what feels good. They move toward what feels necessary. When you see motivation clearly, people become predictable. Not because they are simple, but because their inner compass is consistent. You're no longer reading reactions. You're reading direction. Number 8. Notice what they avoid. What people avoid speaks louder than what they explain. Conversation, like behavior, has blind spots, areas the mind quietly detours around to stay emotionally safe. These detours are not accidental. They are protective maneuvers. When you learn to notice avoidance, you begin to see where the inattention lives. Avoidance shows up first as topic deflection. A question is answered indirectly. Humor appears suddenly. A new subject is introduced with urgency. These shifts are rarely conscious. They happen when the nervous system senses threat. The mind steers away before discomfort fully forms. Watch for energy drops. Someone engaged moments ago becomes flat when a certain name, memory, or responsibility enters the conversation. The words continue, but the vitality disappears. Emotion has pulled back. This withdrawal marks psychological sensitivity. Another form of avoidance is overgeneralization. Instead of specifics, people speak in vague terms. Things, stuff, that situation. Vagueness is a shield. Precision forces accountability. Ambiguity offers safety. The less detail someone gives around a topic, the more weight it likely carries. Notice also delayed responses. When someone pauses longer than usual before answering a question they normally would answer easily, the mind is deciding what not to say. That hesitation is internal negotiation. Something is being filtered out. Physical avoidance matters too. Averted gaze, shifting posture, sudden stillness, or increased self-soothing behaviors, touching the neck, face, or hands, often appear when internal resistance rises. The body pulls away before words do. Perhaps the most revealing form of avoidance is repetition without resolution. People revisit the same story, complaint, or conflict without ever moving toward clarity or change. This loop suggests fear of the conclusion more than the problem itself. Resolution would require action, loss, or responsibility, and that is what's being avoided. Importantly, avoidance is not weakness. It is information. It points to fear, unresolved emotion, guilt, attachment, or unmet needs. Judging it closes insight. Observing it opens understanding. When you learn to notice avoidance, you stop pushing for answers and start noticing pressure points. You understand where the mind tightens and why. And here is the quiet mastery of this skill. People can tell you anything they want, but they cannot hide what they refuse to touch. Avoidance is the mind's outline of its deepest conflicts. Once you learn to see it, silence becomes a language of its own. Finally, reading people is not about control, manipulation, or superiority. It is about perception. When you learn to notice micro-expressions, shifts from baseline, clusters of body language patterns, projection, calibrated responses, motivation and avoidance, something profound happens. People stop feeling confusing. Their contradictions make sense. Their reactions become readable. Their silence speaks. You realize that most people are not hiding because they are deceptive. They are hiding because they are protecting something fragile inside themselves. True psychological insight doesn't come from forcing answers. It comes from patience, presence, and precision, from watching without judgment, from listening without rushing, from allowing people enough space to reveal themselves naturally. The paradox is that the more neutral and grounded you become, the more transparent others appear. Calm attention lowers defenses. Curiosity invites honesty. Stillness draws out truth. You stop reacting to words and start observing patterns. You stop chasing emotional displays and start understanding motivation. You stop taking projection personally and start seeing unresolved inner conflicts. You stop pushing against avoidance and begin recognizing where the real weight lies. This kind of awareness changes how you move through the world. Conversations deepen. Conflicts lose their grip. Manipulation becomes obvious. Trust becomes clearer. You begin choosing your responses instead of being pulled into reactions. And perhaps the most important shift of all, you start understanding yourself with the same clarity. Because the tools that reveal others also expose your own patterns, your own projections, your own avoidance, your own motivations. Awareness turns outward first, but it always returns inward. In the end, reading people is not about decoding minds. It is about learning the language of human behavior. Once you learn that language, you don't need certainty. You have insight. You don't need control. You have understanding. And understanding quietly and consistently becomes your greatest advantage.